Hey everybody, I'm your host Elad, and today I'm reporting to you from the United Against Fascism and Racism rally. Let's go talk to some people, see what's going on.
Fascism is a threat to our survival. Literally a threat to the survival of everyone's...
So I see we have a couple of signs here. We have never again, and then we have a Star of David with arrows, and it's red. It means Antifa.
Really old, right? If you don't want to do
Wait. Never mind. Thanks, guys. Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm making a video on the rally. Any chance I could ask you guys some questions?
Not me particularly.
Any of you guys? We can keep it casual. It doesn't need to be too intense. Yeah. So why are we out here today for the rally?
Marching against emboldened the white nationalist government, basically, especially after the shit in New Zealand. It's pretty important.
Yeah. So why, like, are we accrediting that attack to like somebody inspiring it? Like, are we directly blaming the attack coming from Trump, or is it just, you know, general craziness?
I mean, I guess Trump would definitely emboldens it somewhat, but I feel like it's been something that's festered out for a while. Yeah. I wouldn't say any one person's to blame, but it's an entire systemic problem, I guess.
And how can we prevent like future attacks?
Partially it would be like a general education about what fascism is, and then like a very organized community self-defense network, just to like, when it does rear its head, just kind of like...
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned self-defense because, so there were shootings at two mosques. One was live streamed, they killed like 40 people. And then the other one, there was one guy with a firearm that was able to fend him off a little bit. They killed 8 people. That's still a ton of people, and that's still a horrible thing. But do you think there should be more opportunity for them to defend themselves potentially with firearms? Because I think that's a great... That's kind of badass, just to be able to defend yourself from a mass shooter, a horrible thing.
Totally. I think that, you know, arms should be used if need be, but if you could resist it without, that's cool too, but sometimes that's not possible. But, and also too, like, one person with a gun isn't going to be able to like fight the entire system either.
I don't know how many guns were in the mosque, but that one guy...
Not that many.
Yeah, I'm probably think that one guy. And you also mentioned we need to do more education about what fascism is. So could you like elaborate a little bit more? What is fascism? Like, do you think, are we calling Trump a fascist?
I mean, you could probably say that. I don't know if he doesn't say that he is a fascist, but he does use the language like white nationalism, nationalist. Those are like far-right rhetoric, talking points that fascists do use, and that is like a hyper-conservative, you know, defending the homeland, and it's also like in the interests of like ruling capitalists.
And it's pretty crazy because, like, whether or not you even want a wall, it doesn't look like Trump's getting a wall done. Like, so,
not a physical barrier.
Yeah, like, because we're talking about how much control he's having, but I don't know how much of a difference he's really making. I mean, his accomplishments on both sides, whether you like him or don't like him, like, what has he done? I don't know what he's done to attribute so much hate, like, get all that hate.
I think in the end what the wall will be is it'll be like he's backtracking on it already, and like the Democrats are pushing things like smart technology and shit like that, and I think that'll be like what it will come down to is it'll just mean more money for militarized police at home in general, and like the wall becomes like this dividing thing between people, not like this physical thing, just like it becomes like a euphemism for police state, I think.
What do you think about the illegal... Do you think there is an illegal immigration crisis? And, like, what is your thought on illegal immigration in general?
I think migration has always been the way that people have always have moved and lived, especially on this continent. And the border that we have is a manufactured colonial thing that's... So it's divided.
Should we let in more, like, immigrants, like open border types, or, like, still limit to some degree?
I think we should let people move freely, and then, you know, if there's any exploitation happening, then it's from the rich who are controlling the system and are allowing, like, causing the migrant crisis, and then allowing, you know, rich business people to exploit cheaper labor.
I know a lot of people talk about it like a humanitarian crisis. I know for the women it's a brutal trip. Statistics vary, but it's like 50 to 80% of women who make the trip get raped, and there's like 1,000 women who are sex trafficked. So it does sound like a humanitarian crisis. What could we do to help change that? And is it just letting in mass amounts of people? There are already issues on some border cities. Tijuana, I know, is having some issues. So
we could, I think part of it would be like pressure our government to like stop interfering in the domestic affairs of these countries, stop impoverishing their countries so that people who can live there can stay there. They don't have to, they're not forced to flee from violence that we're instigating. And that could be a baseline thing. It's like, get our government out of these people's lives. And like,
I agree with you so much on getting the government out of these people's lives. So we have our flag here. It's black and red. What does the flag mean?
Typically, the black and red flag, the black stands for anarchism, and the red stands for communism and syndicalism. There's a lot of different things that this flag could mean.
Don't anarchism and communism kind of intersect in the size of government?
There are a lot of different thoughts on anarchist and communist theory, and to sort of say that they all intersect in one area would be simplifying it a little too much. So I'm unwilling to say that.
Yeah.
But
do you know if this is a large faction here?
I am not aware, and I'm not going to be answering any more questions.
Thank you so much for your time, dude. I appreciate it. What do you think the worst is harming the black community the worst in the United States today? What can we do to help black people, the black community? What's the number one thing on the list? Is it white supremacy or is it something else?
White supremacy manifests itself in a lot of different ways. You understand this, right? It's not just crazy skinheads. It's not just crazy Trump supporters. It manifests itself in corporations. It manifests itself in poverty. It manifests itself in food deserts. It manifests itself in economic oppression. There are a lot of ways that that it's manifest. Now, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, this is the absolute most horrific symbol of it. But it's not police brutality, and the problem is we could fix police brutality with the stroke of a pen. With the stroke of a pen, legislators can fix these problems.
How could we? So right now we already integrated a lot of police forces. Wait, can I? Okay.
No. You can't finish because you haven't let me finish.
Please.
Okay. You talk about the number one cause of death being health related, right? Food deserts. People are denied proper food. Fast food companies target fast food companies that are white owned, okay? These soda companies that are white owned target poor black minorities, send chemicals in these foods to our neighborhoods, advertise to our neighborhoods, send different recipes to different neighborhoods, and they're poisoning our people. You talk about the era of mass incarceration, right? The drug war and how people are locked up. And now you have Trump with the First Step Act, right? Acknowledging this. However, his supporters won't acknowledge that blacks are locked up at disproportionate rates. What is it, 23% for the same 20?
And it's been like that through Democratic presidents. See, I wonder, but please, you spoke for a while. Now let me ask. You're talking about these specific institutions. You're talking about that. You make it sound like a conspiracy about white people trying to poison food. What is black food? What is the biggest food in black culture?
It's white people trying to poison black food. You are no. But the way you say it, you oversimplify.
What is the culinary food of black people? I'm asking you.
I'm talking about what's being marketed. What's our food? What's a staple in our communities? It's the garbage that the slave owners used to throw at us that became staples in our diet.
So who's going to change the culture?
Right? We change the culture, but we combat these companies and make them stop poisoning our communities.
Why don't we just tell black people to stop eating garbage fast food?
We do that at the same time as we fight on the other side. See, that's the problem. It's not like there isn't this oppression that's happening. You try and make light of it like it doesn't exist, like slavery is over, Barack Obama. That's all
slavery
bullshit. That's all. Yeah, no, actually, it's not. The 13th Amendment says that people who are incarcerated are still slaves.
What do you mean
that's
people
the
are
Constitution. That's what I learned That's what I learned.
Are you comparing people in jail to slavery in the United States in the 1800s? But you don't think that's disrespectful to actual slaves to compare people who are in jail to actual slaves?
Amendment.
Okay.
It says it.
Now let me ask you. But
Amendment.
comparing actual slaves in the 1800s.
I don't know what educational pedigree is, but that's what I learned in law school.
Okay.
And these are facts.
Is that the same thing?
Arguing something that's not a fact out of a place of passion and opinion, and it's bullshit. And that's why people are being killed, because you speak passionately, and these idiots listen to you, and they think that you're right, and they think that they're promoting this cause, but they're doing nothing more but promoting white supremacy.
White people are killing black people is what you're saying, then?
Absolutely.
At the largest rate, you think white people are perpetrating crime and killing black people more than any other groups?
It is white supremacy. So you really need to stop trying to oversimplify.
What institutions are it? Can we point to an institution that we could point to and say white supremacy right here in whatever institution, in the education system? Name me a person so we get these people out of office.
The government.
The whole government. Can we be more specific?
Government. the judicial system. Like, don't oversimplify it with me, because I am not your idiot.
I'm not oversimplifying.
I am not your idiot. You're standing in it. You're standing all around it. And if, like I said, if you argued numbers, even conservatives say it. Even conservatives say that the judicial system is oppressive. It is racist. So when we say cops are locking up blacks at disproportionate rates and everybody disagrees with us, and Trump comes out and introduces the First Step Act, the Fraternal Order of Police endorsed it, thereby endorsing the fact that policing is racist in America. I'm not your Negro. I have a college degree. I have a business degree. Okay, I have a law degree. You're not just going to come and talk to me as if I'm some idiot. Talk to me about law.
What did I ask you? What did I ask you that makes you think?
Oversimplify things, and that's what you do. And then some idiot in New Zealand or wherever watches this foolishness and feel empowered. And that's it for me.
All right, thank you for your time. You did a good job on Candace Owens. You did. You did. So I see your sign over here, and it says, "No Jim Crow 2.0. We're out here for the United Against Fascism and Racism rally." What does this sign mean, and why are you out here, and what's it mean for you to be out here?
I would say that one of the many communities under attack by fascism are the black is the black community, but they're obviously not the only one. Pretty much, as some of the speakers have been saying, everybody's under attack, whether it's the threat of nuclear war or climate change or a police state. Everybody is endangered. Even the bozos with the Trump signs over there don't realize that those in power are coming for them too.
Yeah. So the sign says
is about mass incarceration.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Donald Trump was one of actually the big proponents of some criminal reform. Did you hear about that, and what do you think about that?
I have heard about that, and you know, I don't really buy it. It might have a some
a lot of
kind
people
of
are saying he's
positive
softening
effect.
up on crime, and other people are saying it's not enough. So I just wanted your
Sure. I imagine that the tragedies of corporate control of America have affected everybody. Well, no, I know that that's the case, even poor white people. And I imagine that he's desperately trying to hold on to his base, who, even though a lot of them are cultishly obsessed with them, some of them are suffering under the effects of that. And some of them are probably caught in the criminal justice system, unsurprisingly, like a lot of black people and immigrants and others. So I imagine that measure was just to desperately and cynically hold on to that group of people.
So I know Trump's been trying to help poor Americans a lot. We've hit the lowest unemployment for black people and women. What else do you think Trump could do to kind of help the lower and middle class?
I'm unsure about that last statistic. What
lowest unemployment for black men and women?
According to what?
I could look it up, but I think it's close to like 6% for blacks. You could double check me on that, but please look it up because it is the lowest.
It might be possible.
It's definitely the lowest. I don't know if the number's right though.
The problem with this is that these are complicated phenomena that are not just related to one president
is
or
like
another.
Capitalism helping, or do you think capitalism is the problem? Because a lot of people say that capitalism helped bring a ton of poor people out of poverty, and it's helping a ton of people worldwide. But then a lot of people are also saying a lot of people are suffering. I mean, your sign says Jim Crow 2.0. I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, I think capitalism is a complicated term. I think there's the practice of greed and plutocracy. If that's capitalism, that's not helping anybody at all.
Sounds like, I mean, it's self-interest. It's having the freedom to open a business and being able to sell at whatever rate you want, and letting supply and demand work out. So
in theory, I support that. I like that, but if that's what capitalism is, I stand behind that. I'm a kind of, I hate to say it, a kind of centrist in that regard. Capitalism, a little bit of capitalism, a little socialism. My communist friends would hate me for that, but whatever. I love them anyway. But so if that's what we're talking about, something like what you're talking about, just in theory, the ability to do free enterprise and compete
free
and that
market,
sort of thing, that might
regulation, but A little bit of regulation, because the question's not whether or not there'll be regulation. I guess the question is what the regulation will be. So obviously there should be some degree of regulation, but in general, free markets.
Regulation.
On what? Where? On what doesn't have any regulation?
There's no regulation of the fossil fuel industry. When
No regulation of the fossil fuel.
That industry needs to be dismantled immediately,
So
or
are you
else
a big
we're all
proponent
going
of
to
the
die.
Green New Deal? And
There's different understandings of that, but basically, yes. We need
so
to.
your understanding, what's the Green New Deal like you support?
In principle, I support a combination of advocacy for poor and economically dispossessed people and previously targeted communities, and also moving industries away from climate change, the industries that contribute to climate
Like
change.
green tech.
Maybe,
But you're
maybe
trying to see the
not.
expansion of green tech. Like, is the goal to get to net zero emissions or lower our
Yes,
emissions? Because
yes.
I know that's going to be a really difficult feat.
Well, we're not. It's going to be a lot harder to survive the effects of climate change if we don't do this. So we can talk about political difficulties, but we're all going to die if we don't do it. That's what people don't get.
The United States definitely needs to make a difference. I want to ask, do you know what percent of the CO2 emissions year over year that the United States contributes compared to like other countries?
I don't know, but
And if it's really low, would it change our outlook on how
it's
we
not
tackle
really
it?
low. That's for sure.
Well, it's about 15% year over year, and then like countries like China and India are kind of doubling us. So the question kind of leads to, if climate change is a problem and it's kind of like this road we're going down, how are we going to lower it in those different countries too? So like, how are we going to
Well-
convince the Chinese and Indian people to follow our lead into green tech when this technology is really benefiting the people there? People are being taken out of poverty right now in India because we're using fossil fuels. So.
But the problem is that if the ecosystem and the biosphere totally collapses, so will our economy. So if there are temporary, small positive changes in people's lives, that's good in the short term. But if our biosphere collapses, we won't be able to eat money. We won't be able to eat returns on investments. We're gonna. So I would say that it has to be in an international movement.
So why are you out here today for the rally?
Well, I think it's really important in these times, in the country and in the world, to fight for people who are disenfranchised and who are mistreated by our government and the institutions that run the world.
What kind of like injustices with like between races and sexes do you see in the U.S. that we could like point at and try to change, do you think?
Well, I mean, if you look at the language that our leaders use, our president and some of the senators and leaders in our country, and also in other places in the world, the things they're saying and the things they're doing. I mean, if you look at the border policies and how we're treating refugees like they're criminals, and it's just a disgrace.
Yeah. I know it sounds really bad, but Trump hasn't built a wall yet. So are we harsh to those immigrants? Do you want to let more of them in? Like, how should we accomplish the immigration crisis?
So the immigration crisis has really been increased by these policies because previously, if you wanted to enter the country, you go to a port of entry, but people are being denied at ports of entry for legal entry. So if you want legal immigration to happen, you need to make it more accessible, and you need to invest more in that process, and then people can come legally.
I want to ask, how many illegal immigrants do you think we have in the United States, like estimated?
Illegal immigrants?
Yeah.
Well, it would be hard to tell, really, wouldn't it? Because
Like, studies show it's like 10 to 30 million out of a population of about 300 million. Yeah. So I was just asking. That's not too.
How do they get that stat?
Well, it's a big range. It's 10 million to 30 million. But
Okay,
that's
what I wonder. Like, how is that
that's-
stat calculated? Because I don't know if that sounds exactly correct. But
No, and I think it's around a little less or around $1 million a year. And you could look up all these things.
well, how do they come? Do they come like overstaying their visas on? Well, that's the main. That's the main way that people come to this country illegally, is that they fly in and then they overstay visas.
But should we limit to how many illegal immigrants we want to have in the
Well,
U.S.?
we shouldn't have any illegal immigrants. If we make the process easier and we make the legal process to become a citizen here or to become, legal resident here, if we make that process simpler, more straightforward, then we won't have illegal immigration on the scale that you're claiming we do.
So I feel like the question becomes, because we already have people on the line to become legal immigrants, are we going to allow the people who are already here illegally to kind of cut in front of them in the line to become citizens?
So I think what needs to happen is we need to rethink the policy overall. I don't know if they should cut in front, but obviously it's something that we need to handle right away. I think there's so much emphasis on these illegal immigrants being criminals or being considered aliens, and I think we really need to consider how that's like a social injustice to be calling people who are refugees illegal and aliens and whatever.
The thing is, there's a lot of angel parents who have suffered the consequences of some illegal immigration. Some people have been, some people have families who had people who were killed by crimes that were committed by illegal immigrants.
What about domestic violence, domestic terrorism that's not caused by immigrants? The scale the percentage of crimes committed by immigrants is so incredibly low. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but it's so incredibly low.
But what about the people who say still additional crime happening in the counties or in the parts mostly the southern states?
Yeah. Well, it's just that the stats, I don't know what they are, but they're not accurate. Like, there aren't as many crimes committed by immigrants. Okay. I just think that people put so much emphasis on that, and it's not a real claim.
I also wanted to ask,
it's not a valid claim.
Your thoughts on the 2020 election. Who do you want your candidate to be, and who do you want to see president in 2020, assuming it's not Trump?
So, unfortunately, I am very concerned that Trump will win again, especially with the current climate. But I would love to see a woman, and I think we lost
Harris,
a great
Elizabeth Warren.
I'm a huge proponent of Elizabeth Warren. I think her economic policies are super sound. I just think it's time that we have a woman president. I also really love Bernie Sanders. I think, a lot of people want to say that he's extreme, but the policies that he supports are working in real time in other places. I have a very good friend from Denmark who's here, and I was talking with her the other day about her life and how amazing it is, and how everyone can just go to the hospital if they're sick, get proper care, and they don't have to pay a dime. And I just think that that's an amazing opportunity. And education, everyone has an equal playing field. If someone wants to be a certain profession, they're not afraid that they're not going to be able to afford it.
I mean, you sound a little bit pessimistic.
I am a little bit pessimistic because I see the hold that Trump has on his base, and these extremist, fascist, and racist people that have come out of the woodwork.
But can we point the finger? So where are the racist, fascist people here in the United States, and what can we do to help stop their movement?
So white supremacy is in all of our institutions, and it has been since the beginning of our country. What do you mean, which ones?
Which institutions have white supremacy ingrained in them?
The entire institution of the United States of America. I mean, when we first came here, we enslaved an entire group of people to create our economy. And it still remains because the wages are so low and housing isn't affordable, and people were forced to live in these really, awful areas with high crime. And poverty is part of the institution of our government. It was created, after Jim Crow. People still don't have the same opportunities. Just because people aren't communities aren't segregated anymore legally, they're still segregated.
I want to ask, so if there was a black boy born today and a white boy born to more or less the same situations, do you think they have an equal shot at things in the U.S.?
So I don't know if the percentage of people born in the same situation are as high as you think they are. If you take big cities, for example, like New York and Chicago, a poor black boy and a poor or a middle-class white person, they do not have the same opportunity.
Let's say if we could control for the statistics and we could find a situation where they're born into more or less the same situation, the same financial background, their parents make around the same money in a similar neighborhood, do you think they have an equal opportunity at being successful?
So opportunity is one thing, but when the overall sentiment in a country is that one race is inferior to another, which I think is overall obviously a very prominent thing when we elect someone who doesn't denounce David Duke's support. When we have a president who was literally...
Didn't he denounce David Duke's support?
He said, I don't even know who that is. Okay. Like he acted like he was...
I don't know specifically, but yeah.
Yeah.
He should clearly denounce David Duke. I know Tulsi Gabbard recently got some support from David Duke because he's just an anti-Semite, and Tulsi Gabbard doesn't really support Israel. So it's just kind of a mesh of politics.
I think supporting Israel and denouncing... lobbyists who are supporting a far-right regime in Israel, I think that's different. There's definitely a difference between being fascist and being racist, but just not agreeing with certain policies, yeah.
Was there anything else you want to note?
No, I just think all of us need to stand together for those without a voice, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I hope my questions weren't too aggressive and it was like a nice back and forth.
I just wasn't expecting it.
No, I'm sorry. Because some people call me Nazi and stuff, and I thought that was a cool conversation we were able to have, even though we probably disagree on some stuff, but really cool. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Here for the United Against Racism and Fascism rally. Why are you out here, and what does it mean to you to be out here?
It just means that it's important to be out on the streets to say that what's going on in terms of racism and fascism in this country and worldwide, and as a matter of fact, being provoked and incited and encouraged by the person in the White House and his cronies, it's not acceptable. It's absolutely critical that people get out on the streets and say no.
Do you think Donald Trump perpetuates terrorism?
I think he actually functions in some ways as a terrorist, because white supremacy and white nationalism, which is what he is, that is terrorism.
A lot of that white supremacy garbage blemishes online a lot, and it kind of existed prior to Trump.
Prior.
What? Yeah, way prior.
There's a long history in this country and worldwide, white nationalism.
So why is it specifically Trump, though, that's the root and the cause in perpetuating it then? Because there's such a long history, there's horrible communities online that perpetuate this stuff. But don't you think blaming Donald Trump's a little bit extreme?
Well, I don't think it's about blaming him. His rhetoric and what he speaks for absolutely encourages the white nationalist and racist rhetoric and speech, and encourages violence.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, so there were two shootings at two separate mosques. One person at one mosque, there were 40 people who died at one mosque, and then about 8 or 9 who died at the other. But one of the people at the second mosque had a gun, a firearm, and he was able to fend off the shooters. What do you think about that? And do you think these the people at the prayer service should have had more of an opportunity to maybe had access to more guns? What do you think about that stuff?
I think that we need fewer guns and fewer weapons, and that this is a culture that promotes violence in its support of guns and weapons. That's probably one of the only industries this country has anymore. So I think it's absolutely, violence begets violence, and I'm not in favor of weapons.
Yeah. Do you think white supremacy is the face of terrorism in the U.S. and worldwide?
Well, I think there's a subtle difference between white supremacy and white nationalism.
Oh, okay.
And I would say that white nationalism is absolutely, at this point in the European white world, is having a major resurgence and being promoted by a lot of leaders, whether it's Hungary, Poland, Assisi, and Egypt. It's all over.
Yeah. Do you think there are any other groups promoting any different types of terrorism in the world that we should also be worried about?
I think that terrorism is horrendous, though.
Yeah. But besides white supremacy terrorism, are there any other types of terrorism that we should be worried about?
I think that one should be concerned about terrorism, period. Good. However, what I am addressing is white nationalism and the power and the money that is behind it.
Anything else you want to note?
No, thanks.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. I wanted to pose the question back to you. What do you think about the interviews I was able to have? Let me know down in the comments. If this is your first time here, guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay barely informed.